We talk about why do bad things happen to good people, and I don't claim to have the answer to that question in its entirety, but I do have a few thoughts that I want to share that might give you a little bit of hope, that might build your faith, and might put some of that in a little bit of perspective. I do not believe that we will ever have the perfect answer to all this, but I do think there's some things that we can think about that might grow and build our faith rather than tear our faith down. I don't know the mind of God. I don't know why God does all the things that he does, but we do know his character. And so I want to start with this question. Can God make a being who is always guaranteed to do the right thing and also has freedom of choice? The answer, I believe, to that is no. No, God cannot create that. Well, then you're going to say, okay, Matt, well, God can do anything because God has all the power. He's omnipotent. Are you really saying that God can't do something? There's something he cannot do. Well, yes, I actually am very much saying that there's something that God can't do. Let me put it from this perspective. Can God create a circle that is also at the same time a square? No, God can't do that. And it's not a power issue. It's a problem of definitions. There are certain things that once it's defined this way, it cannot be defined that way. So let me phrase it this way. Can God have a being who is both in the condition of being saved and the condition of being lost at the exact same time? No, God can't do that. Because once you enter into the condition of being saved, you're no longer in the condition of being lost. They're mutually exclusive. Okay. So being a circle and a square, mutually exclusive. Having the guarantee that you will always choose to do the right and loving thing and also have freedom of choice, mutually exclusive. It's not a power issue. Once you are guaranteed absolutely to unequivocally choose the right and loving thing, you no longer have free choice because the outcome is guaranteed. Therefore, you no longer have choice. You cannot have choice in a guaranteed outcome where someone else is guaranteeing the outcome. I can't even guarantee my own outcomes. I change my mind. Okay. So it's not a matter of the power of God. God is love, and God made us in his image. He made us to love. And one of the requirements for us as people in the flesh who are made to love is we have a choice to choose, and we can choose God, or he allows us to choose even if it's not him. That's actually a loving thing for God to give us that sort of freedom and give us that sort of ability to be self-governing, because love requires us to have a myriad of options and choose this one over all the rest and commit ourselves to this one over all the rest and look out for the best interest and the benefit of this one rather than ourselves. It's loving, then requirement for love is for us to have the freedom to choose, but that means that there are times we're going to choose the wrong and unloving thing. We don't need to be told to love God with all of our heart, soul, mind, and strength and love our neighbor as ourselves if it's guaranteed to happen or if we don't struggle with that. Why else have the instruction? It's like, thou shalt breathe. Okay, not struggling with that one. So God made a good world. In that world, he created people with the ability to love because we have the ability to choose. And because we had the ability to choose, they, Adam and Eve, chose the wrong thing. Do not eat of the tree, the knowledge of good and evil, for when you eat of it, you will surely die. You will be dead, dead, you will die, die. It's a heavily emphasized phrase there in Hebrew. Read Genesis 3. Several things broke when they sinned. The relationship between human beings was broken in a sense. The relationship between us and God was broken in a sense. Enmity was put between man and the serpent. And there was a barrier put up between the earth and humanity. The soil of the ground will no longer just give its fruit easily like it used to, but by the sweat of your brow, you will till and work the earth and produce that good harvest that God had told them to do. This is why we have disasters. This is why we have earthquakes, tsunamis, tornadoes, etc., because the earth broke. Well, there's good news. There's hope, because not only will God redeem people, but in Romans 8, he redeems creation itself. That the creation is longing and groaning in anticipation of not only the redemption of the sons of God, but of redemption of creation itself. That God is going to put it all back in order, back the way it's supposed to be. God cares about these things greatly. Love required choice. Choice opened the door for sin, pain, death, injustice, murder, only a couple chapters into Genesis. So we look at all sorts of the inhumanities of man against man, and the same thing, free will, that allows people to harm each other, also allows people to be truly loving. God did not create this brokenness. We created this brokenness. And you and I participate in this every time we sin. So I don't believe that God just like sends tsunamis and sends earthquakes and all this, but it is the byproduct, the outcome, the result or consequence of us participating in the darkness. So the brokenness is our fault, not God's. And there would be no way for you to love God without the possibility of the broken parts too. What would the world be like if you were God? If you had all the knowledge and you had all the power? Well, you would know every injustice and you would have the power to stop it. As human beings, we see injustice, we pray about it, we ask God to stop it, and sometimes He does and sometimes He doesn't, and we're left wondering why sometimes He doesn't. Let's say not only did you have the knowledge of oppression or injustice, but you also had the knowledge of the outcome. What kinds of things might be produced if you allowed someone to go through such a thing? This is like being a parent, and we watch our children do crazy things. And we see them doing it, and when they're little, okay, don't touch the stove and these kinds of things. But there comes a point in time when you have to give them some freedom to experience some bumps and some bruises, some difficulties, some heartaches and headaches, because that's how you learn and that's how you grow. If you insulate and isolate everyone from every possible disaster, there is no growth in that. God knows the outcomes. He knows the good that's going to come. He knows salvation that's going to come. He knows how the gospel is going to spread. He knows how the kingdom is going to spread. He knows how those difficulties are going to bring people for generations sometimes to a better place. Would it be more loving or less loving to allow people to go through difficulty if it was going to bring about a greater good in the long run? I would say it would be less loving to cut someone off from the very thing that's going to produce the fruit. And so we see all kinds of examples where difficulty produces beautiful, wonderful things that would have never taken place had someone not gone through hard things. May it well be the loving thing to do to allow human beings to suffer, to go through difficulty. And again, I don't have all the answers at every specific or every situation, like childhood leukemia. That kind of makes me a little mad. Like, what good comes out of that? Well, there can be that good that comes out of that, but we will never completely understand these things, not this side of eternity. Well, if I were God, everybody would be happy all the time. Well, do we need to be happy all the time? Is being happy all the time good for us? Maybe God allows us to go through difficulty, sadness, because a greater good can be produced. And because that is the only way to allow love to truly be love, is to open up us to a world that sometimes inflicts pain, hardship, grief. See, I would love to be in control. There'd be no hardship, there'd be no suffering, there'd be no struggling. There would also be people who didn't know how to be resilient. There would also be people who didn't know how to discipline themselves. There would also be people who didn't know how to get through hard things. There'd be people who didn't know to turn to God for help, to lean to God in faith. Well, we can't have this video without talking about Jesus. The fact that God brought His own self into this world to experience the consequences of God's allowing us to have free will Himself. That Jesus experienced betrayal, that Jesus experienced pain, agony, whipping, crucifixion, abandonment, etc. He went through the whole range of emotion. He went through the whole range of temptation. Every single thing that came as a result of the free will that God imparted to us that then resulted in the sin God took upon Himself. He did not make Himself immune or set Himself apart from our situation that God, in a sense, allowed in the way that He set things up. But He came into this world to show us what love really looked like in the midst of the worst of the worst. That this is how you love anyway. This is how you love God and obey Him and follow Him anyway. This is how you even love those who crucify you. Father, forgive them. They do not know what they are doing. That is so loving. God put Himself right in the middle of the garbage. It would be one thing if God just said, oh, well, let me set this up and then you're going to fail and then I'm just going to watch over this and go, ooh, that's really a mess. He put Himself right in the middle of it and the worst of it. And then if you read the New Testament, you read like 1 Peter and other books, Peter says that because Christ suffered first, that there is so much to be gained through suffering. Why do bad things happen to good people? Well, sometimes there are things that God leverages for the good, for our betterment. And man, I wish sometimes there was just a different way to go about this, God. Is there not another way to achieve the same outcome? Well, apparently no, there's not. No, there's not. This must be the most loving way to go about it, because it's the way that God chose, and God is love. And Jesus himself demonstrated this in his life, going through all that he went through for us, so that God is developing us to produce perseverance and faith and resiliency and all the things in James and in 1 Peter that God tells us that suffering produces. You cannot produce the same outcome without the same means. This is what God has chosen, and he demonstrated us through Christ. This is the way. So I'm not saying that I've answered all the questions, but I do think it's important to frame this, that it's not about an issue of the power of God or the love of God or the knowledge of God. These things can all be, I believe, worked out on some level. We just need to acknowledge that we are not God, that we do not know what he knows, we do not see what he sees, we cannot do what he does, and so we're going to have to trust him, even when it's hard, even when it doesn't make sense. And I'm sure you've been through hard times when sometime later it actually did make a little bit of sense. Not everything will end up making sense. And that's okay, because we're not God. So if these thoughts have blessed you today, maybe you completely disagree with them, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Hit that thumbs up, let YouTube know it's working, hit subscribe if you haven't, but appreciate you taking some time to watch this, share it with a friend. Putting a video up on the screen about how God uses the wilderness to shape us as people that dovetails right in with this lesson. So I hope you take a minute to watch that. Y'all take care.